Wow. Pura vida, mi gente. How you guys doing? We got a little pre-Shabbat reading. Yeah, so we're gonna continue reading from the book Ancient and Modern Britons. And I just wanted to read chapter 7 with you guys together, if you don't mind. you guys don't mind me reading chapter 7. Yeah, I think I know that book. So we're gonna again read from Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1. So eagerly I want to get to Volume 2 with you guys, but wanted to definitely read some chapters in Volume 1. All right, and again today we're gonna read chapter 7. This is again from David MacRitchie. Please let me know at any time if the music is louder than my voice or if it's too loud. Again, Ancient and Modern Britons, a retrospect, Volume 1, from 1884. 1884. So check out the first two videos. We read chapters 1 and 2, and actually 1, 2, and 3, and up to 4, I think. Yeah. We read the first 4 chapters. So make sure to catch those videos if you haven't. If you never encountered the book, allow to drop. Okay. And again, today we are going to page 110 of the book, and we're in chapter 7. Let it once be understood that the Picts of history were blackamoors. Again, let it once be understood right away. All right, let me just throw this out there right away. He says that the Picts of history were blackamoors, or melanated people, huh? The question next arises, could they have been related to the Scandinavians, as some aver, with a question mark, Heatley says that the Picts who early seized the Scottish lowlands were akin to the Scandinavians, and Martin, in his description of the western islands of Scotland, says that it is generally acknowledged that the Picts were originally Germans, and particularly from the part of it bordering upon the Baltic Sea. All right, so this is people's opinions. We got our own conclusions. And even this author, as you will see later on in later chapters, while another last century voyager, Tennant, and speaking of the Round Tower at Brechen, remarks thus: the learned among the antiquaries are greatly divided concerning the use of these buildings, as well as the founders. Some think them Pictish, probably because there is one at Abernethy, the ancient seat of that nation, and others call them Danish, because it was the custom of the Danes to give an alarm in the time of danger from high places. The writers I have quoted are rather old-fashioned and unscientific, but the opinions they repeat are held at the present day. Therefore, it becomes evident that some race of Scandinavians must have been black Huns also. Again, therefore it becomes evident that some race of Scandinavians must have been black Huns also, black Huns, with physical characteristics approaching those of the Pictish Moors, just like the Pictish Moors. The black Huns were supposed to be a Mongoloid people, or Mongol, right? People say Mongol, that's a bad way of saying it. But even Mongol is a little hijacked when you understand the etymology and the origin of that word. And we would integrate the study of Anatoly Fomenko when it comes to the ancient Mongols, who they were, and the Russian hordes, and how the histories kind of combine, and the people. So it's pretty interesting here where it's letting us know, huh? The Black Huns, who are approaching those of the Pictish Moors, the physical characteristics, either in the Australoid or in the Mongoloid direction. And since the Mongoloid belt stretches generally north of the Australoid, it seems likely that any possible Scandinavian Picts belong to the former, rather than to the latter type. There really happens to be a tradition of a Hungarian invasion of Scotland. Hector Boyce, in referring to this legend, tells us that while some write that they were Hungarians, others say that they were a company collected from Scots and Angles. This was in the year 875 AD, all right, according to their chronologies. The date of the Danish invasion of Scotland. But this statement recalls the Huns proper, of whom something has already been said. They, it will be remembered, united in their persons the qualities of the two great types under consideration. They were of a dark complexion, all right? Dark complexion, almost black, deformed in their appearance, of uncouth gesture and shrill voice. They were distinguished, says Gibbon, from the rest of the human species by their broad shoulders, flat noses, and small black eyes, deeply buried in the head. And they were almost destitute of beards. They had attained to such a degree of power in the 5th century that they were able to exact an annual tribute from Rome so that the empire might be secure from further injury. They had previously occupied all the territories that had been abandoned by the Goths, whose dominions reached from the Baltic to the Euxine, or Exine. After the death of Attila in 454, their power waned, and gradually, as Huns, they disappeared from sight. Many centuries before the days of Attila, the provinces of Rome had been invaded from the north by hordes of barbarians, one section of which resembled the Huns in several particulars. Towards the end of the 2nd century before Christ, the Romans, so-called Romans, right, under Marius had to repel the attacks of the Ambrones, the Teutones, and the Simri, or the Cimmerians, Simri, same people, who poured into Italy in immense numbers, only, however, to suffer defeat. It is said of the Simri that 140,060 were slaughtered by the Romans, and 60,000 taken prisoners, and this overwhelming defeat most effectually put a stop to their inroads. But before that, they had in one battle destroyed 8,000 Romans. Lempriere, whose words have just been quoted, described them as a people of ancient Germany. Example, Scythians, who at one time inhabited that part of the country which now forms the modern kingdom of Denmark, or the Mark of Dan. Remember previous presentations, guys. They were very powerful, and in their invasion of the Roman Empire were so courageous and even desperate that they fastened their first ranks each to the other with cords. A quainter recorder than Lempriere has this to say of the Simri, all right, Cimmerians. They have enrolled into Italy with a design to take Rome, but were beaten and routed by Marius. This was in 640. So that about the period when one branch of the Hyong-no was invading the Chinese Empire on the east and southeast, another branch was carrying fire and sword through the countries to the west and southwest. There is scarcely enough evidence to fully warrant this conclusion, but there are some resemblances between the two barbarian hordes. Both were Scythian, though this does not mean much, and the vast bodies and dreadful looks of the Simri suggest the broad shoulders and other dreadful looks of the Huns. The Huns were of a dark complexion, And so also were the Simri, so some of the Cimmerians, Simri, as shall be afterwards seen, both were plainly of a warlike and nomadic disposition. They were both, in fact, Latronos or Latrones, freebooters, pirates. Who's the pirates? It seems likely, in short, that the Hyong were in Europe several centuries before the date assigned by the Gignes, although fresh hordes swarmed westward out of Asia in the early part of the Christian era. The country inhabited by the Cimbri was, it is stated, the modern Denmark and Holstein, which indeed received from them the name of Cimbrica, Chersonesus, or the peninsula of the Cimbri. But those Cimbri are said to have been known by another name, Dani idem ki Cimbri, the Danes. So they also occupied that part of Denmark, the Cimmerians. And a lot of people do mix them with Danes. It now begins to appear possible that the tradition of a Hungarian invasion of Scotland, contemporary with inroads of Danes, is the memory of the arrival of one nation under two names. If this be the case, then the commonly fair-skinned people now inhabiting Denmark are out of the question. Okay? Are out of the question, as having nothing in common with the Dani of vast bodies and dreadful looks. If it can be shown that the Danes who invaded and overran the British islands in the 8th and succeeding centuries, and who were distinctly Latrones or pirates, were also dark-skinned, like the Black Huns, then the identification of the 8th century Danes, who are confused with Hungarians, with the Dani or Cimbri, all confused, right? Mixing all these people up. And again, with the more or less Mongoloid Huns or Hyongnu, mixing all these people into one, will be strongly suggested if not established. It is necessary in steering one's way through the numerous invasions of the Northmen to distinguish clearly between Norwegians and Danes. This is evidently done in the Pictish Chronicle, the Norwegians being called Normani, and the Danes Danari, Danan, Dan. Ever since the Danes or the Gal first came to Ireland, there had been a contest between them and the Norwegians or Fingal for superiority. And in 877 a battle took place between them, in which the Norwegians had the victory. The Danes, being for the time driven out of Ireland, went to Alban or Scotland, Albany or Albion, England. The mere fact of jealousy and warfare existing between the two does not of itself warrant one in concluding that the Northmen and the Eastmen, as Danes and Saxons together were styled by the Franks, all right, or AKA as they're saying, were different in race, but it shows that they regarded themselves as different in nationality. Probably the name Viking also belongs to the Danes and not at all to the Normans. All right, to the Danes, who are, as we said earlier, dark-skinned. Vikings, black Vikings. Oh yeah, we've gone over this. It is as Danes and Vikings, or the six kings, possibly, Roman numeral, six kings of the Danes, Danites, that the piratical hordes that plundered, burnt, and destroyed along the Scottish seaboard are chiefly known, and it was by a treaty with the King of Denmark in 1014 that the Scottish king, Malcolm, all right, who's described as very swarthy, succeeded in obtaining the withdrawal of these marauders from his country. However, the two peoples, Northmen and Eastmen, Norwegians and Danes, are also known by other names. Besides the general term of Gentiles, says Mr. Skeen, that of Gaul, the Irish word for stranger, was likewise applied to them, and two nations were distinguished as Fingal, white or fair-haired Gauls, fair-haired, so white or either or, so that are you talking about complexion or hair? There's a big difference. So it could be just hair, right? Fair haired Gauls, and Dubgal, black or dark haired Gauls, all right? So just like that, right? So we're gonna say, well, they only mean dark hair here, Kurimeo. They don't mean black. Well, the same thing here. They don't mean white then, right? Gotta apply it both ways, or they're literally talking about, yeah, complexions, right? The former being Norwegians, the latter Danes. So the latter Danes, the Danes are the Dubgal, Dub, black, uh, foreigners or strangers. The typical Dane of today is not a black-haired man, quite the reverse. And Dub means black again, and Dub means black. In case you guys don't know, Dublin, just like Dublin, yeah, Dub. Dub means black, so-called black, without any word of hair. They're not just talking about hair, literally is what he's saying. These two sections of invaders were also known as Finn Genti and Dub Genti. Again, what does Dub mean? The black Gentiles. White Gentiles and black Gentiles. And as according to Armstrong, Fionn Lochlinech and Dub Lochlinech, white and black Lochliners, or Scandinavians. And in the wars of the Gaedhil and the Gals and Gals and the Danari are styled black Danars. Alright? Black Danars or black Danes, guys. Just talking about so-called black Vikings too. Northmen. In none of these terms is there any hint that the color of the hair is indicated. Alright. Okay. We ain't just talking about hair for everybody who likes to practice cognitive dissonance in the comment section. But the expression used by Saint Bertrand, and speaking of the Norwegians, leaves no room for doubt. He calls them the Gentiles of pure color. The Danes then were not of pure color. Why? Because they were Dub. Because they were so-called black. Alright? They didn't consider them pure of color. Because they were Dub. You get it? Dub. So dub music, yeah, black music. Oh, as black, at any rate, let us suppose, as the black Huns, who were of a dark complexion, almost black. Alright, let me just highlight all this, okay? All this. Alright, screenshot all you want. Snap, snap, snap. There can be no question about it, alright? There's no question. You can't debate this. What they don't understand, the designation given by the common people of one race to another is almost invariably founded upon some physical feature, and the most natural distinction is that of color, where the races differ in complexion. The invading whites styled the Indians of America redskins, and these again called their conquerors pale faces. A native Australian is a black fellow to the modern Briton who, after all, is his exceedingly distant kinsman. Other blacks are roughly spoken of by us either under that title or under its other form as Negroes, all right? Again, all terms, but these are the words used for reference so everybody's clear who these words are being applied to. But when they're saying Dub or Black Huns, they mean Negroes, all right? There's all different types of people that they will consider Negroes, in the world, or Aboriginal. Therefore, when the white races of Britain styled the Danes black heathen, they simply made us use of the most natural term that could occur to them. It was not only in Scotland that the Danes received this name, but throughout the British Islands. Let me give a few extracts from the Annals of St. David's in Wales, the Annales Menevenses, which I obtained from Archbishop Baldwin's itinerary, translated and annotated by Sir R.C. Horry. It is a record of murder and rapine, and sample merely of what was happening throughout the greater part of these islands at that period and before and after it, when a peaceful and partly Christianized people had to suffer every indignity at the hands of a ruthless and brutal race of pirates. The extracts are these, all right? So this is the original. The learned annotator continues farther on, as the account given by Powell in the Welsh Chronicle differs somewhat from the above. I shall insert his tradition. In the year 810, St. David's was burned by the West Saxons. In the year 911, there came a great navy from Twidwick with Utter and Rahald and passed by the western sea to Wales and destroyed St. David's. AD 981, Godfrey, the son of Harold, did gather a great army and landed in West Wales, where, spoiling all the land of Dyfed with the church of St. David's, he fought the Battle of Llanwnog. AD 987, the Danes landed in South Wales and destroyed St. David's, Llanbadarn, Llanrhysted, and Llandudog, which were all places of religion, and did so much hurt in the country besides that to be rid of them. Meredith was fain to agree with them, and to give them a penny for every man within his land, which was called the tribute of the Black Army. The tribute of the Black Army. AD 1078, Menevia was all spoiled and destroyed by strangers. AD 1090, the Normans landed in Glamorganshire and spreading themselves over different parts of South Wales, put an end to the predatory incursions of the Danes and other pirates. These words are Sir R.C. Orre's. The Normans in great companies landed in Dyfed or West Wales and Cardigan and builded castles there, and so began to inhabit the country upon the seashore, and to their protection the church and town of St. David's probably owed the tranquility which they afterwards enjoyed. Here there is perfect unanimity. The cum nigris gentibus of the annals and Powell's Black Army are at one. All right? You see the word right here, guys, right? They're just talking about so-called black. Are at one, they're saying. It's the same people. Thus we have as evidence these terms dub, used with 4 different nouns, Niger and black, all applied in the most natural and matter-of-fact way to the Danish pirates by men of presumably white race. Presumably white race. Can anything be clearer? You guys get the point? What may be called genealogical evidence of the existence of black-skinned races existing in Scotland within historic times has already been adduced in considering the Moors, with parentheses, and it is difficult to decide whether the examples given out to be styled Picts, so-called, or Danes, because both were Picts and contemporaries, and the very district which still bears the name of the ancient Moray men was also the very district in which the Danes lingered longest, that is, excluding the Isles, or the Isles, for which reason it had become the hunting ground of the fair-skinned victors, descendants of Freskine the Fleming, Berwald the Fleming, founder of the powerful Inez family, and others of kindred race. Therefore, when a black man is discovered on a family tree of 1,000 years ago, a so-called black man, on the coat of arms in the family tree, he may be either a Dane or a Pict, all right? He's either a Dane or a Pict. Of those, however, who are better known by the former name, there may be specified an ancestor of the Macleods, or Macleod, that family being held to be descended at the date of Martin's visit to the Western Islands, and in his words, from Leod, son to the Black Prince of Man, all right, Leod, the Macleods, all right, if you're a Macleod, all right, you come from the historical Danes, or the Black Prince of Man, which island was for a long time under the rule of the Danes. Danite, huh? The father of this Leod was in all probability Olaf Swarti, Sovarti, or Olaf the Swarty, Olaf the Swarty, so Swarty. Can I get a hashtag so Swarty? Mentioned in the Plataean manuscript, who was king of Man during the 13th century. A certain branch of the Campbells, all right, the Campbells had also a similar lineage, all right? Taking notes. Yo, shout out to everybody in the chat, all the real ones, all the moderators here. I'm looking at the chat. Thank you for tuning in. Uh, Peter, Marvin, Back for What's Mine, Tlatoni, all the moderators, and again, all the people too, and scriptural visuals, Mrs. Uh, wow, there's a lot of people here. Mad Preacher, yeah. Check out Back for What's Mine channel if you haven't. Boots on the ground. You already know. Hey, so the Campbells had also a similar lineage. If you know some Campbells, let them know. Pennant speaks of Sir Colin. Hey, Sherry, how you doing? Foxy Moon, Chase Dreams over everything. Okay, Mumford, Point Marines. Yeah, we all in the house. Charles Johnson, yeah. Please educate all the children every day. Mrs. D.L. Lieberman, thank you. Crazy Artist, thank you for tuning in. Janie, Truesdale Maya, yeah. Trey Dog, Haruka Tassetti, thanks for tuning in. Glenn Joseph, Maya, Freeman, yeah. The Cosmic Nolan, thank you. LG, the Black Gold, Ipomoa Alba, thank you. Tuning in. Tia Roberta, thank you. Everybody tuning in. Yeah, check out Back for What's Mine's YouTube channel. He's on the chat right now. Just click on it, and save it. And save it. So, Pennant speaks of Sir Colin, ancestor of the Bread Albane line, the famous Knights of Rhodes, surname from his complexion, and from his travels, Duib, not Rome, or Black Colon of Rome. The Black Colon. That's what you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, I remember. Yeah, I know Black Colon. That's how they used to talk back in the day in Roman times in Latin. Like, yeah, Duberna Rome. Yeah, I know Black Colon of Rome. Yeah, I know him. And in the manuscript History of the Campbells, written about 1827, the author says that Rinde Ringdup Luck the Black Knights of Luck was the name then used by old Highlanders. The Highlanders, okay, you already know it's in your family, all right, and mentioning the chiefs of the Duin or Campbells, who or their followers are probably the what? Swarty men from Lorne, the Swarty men, hashtag so Swarty. Introducing one of the legends. Oh, it's a legend. You a legend, bro. They admit it. You're a legend. You're a living legend. They must have been latterly displaced by a totally different race. Oh, they got displaced, huh? Very similar story like the American Indians. As that member of the clan whom I have just quoted states that the Campbells nowadays boast of their yellow hair. He's like, hey, listen, this is the author. It ain't me, guys. All right. 1884, Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1. We're in Chapter 7, page 117. In case you didn't hear it, he said they must have been latterly displaced by a totally different race because now they're like, we got yellow hair. Like, it wasn't like that before. Another and more distinctly visible member of this race may be seen in the beginning of the 11th century in that memorable ship that carried the Northmen to the American coast. Now in Thorvald's ship was one Thorhall, who had been the huntsman in summer, and in winter the steward of Eric the Red. Oh, getting deep now. We got future videos on Mr. Eric the Red. Why is he called the Red? Red man? The red man, huh? He was, it is said, a large man, huh? Strong, black. All right. Eric the Red is what? So-called black. And like a giant, like the mound builders, huh? Like the bones they found in the mound builders, right? Silent and foul-mouthed in his speech and always egged on Eric to the worst. He was a bad Christian. All right, again, Eric the Red, so-called Black, but a still more notable Black Dane. But let's talk about another Black Dane. So they are admitting Eric the Red is so-called Black, guys. All right, future videos. That's what I'm trying to tell you. But a still more notable Black Dane was Earl Thorfinn, son of Sigurd, the most distinguished of all the earls in the islands. His deeds are recorded with some minuteness in the Orkneyinga saga, and he is also referred to in the saga of Saint Olavi. Earl Thorfinn was very precocious in his education and in every improvement. He was a strong man and ugly and of a great stature. When he grew up, it was manifest that he was avaricious, harsh, and cruel, and sagacious. Now, Thorfinn became a great chieftain, one of the largest men in point of stature, ugly of aspect, black-haired, sharp-featured, and somewhat tawny, and the most martial-looking man. He was then 5 winters old when Malcolm, king of the Scots, his mother's father, gave him an earl's title and Katniss to rule over. But he was 14 winters when he prepared maritime expeditions from his country and made war on the domains of other princes. On the day of his great and victorious engagement with the army of Kali Hundason, king of the Scots, his appearance is thus described. All right, primary sources, he says, he had a gilt helmet on his head and was girt with a sword and spear in his hand, and he hewed and cut on both sides. It was it has been related that he was the foremost of all his men. Earl Thorfinn held all his rikis till the day of his death, so that it was said that he was the richest of all the earls of Orkney. He was possessed of 9 earldoms in Scotland, the whole of the Sudreys and the large riki in Ireland. Earl Thorfinn was 5 winters old when Malcolm, king of Scotland, his mother's father, gave him the title of Earl, and he was Earl for 70 or 60 according to St. Olaf's saga, winters. He died in the end of the reign of Harald Sigurdsson and was buried in Kritzkirk in Bergis Heradi, which he had caused to be built. Thorfinn's widow, Ingibjorg, is said to have married Melkolf, king of Scotland, or Malcolm, right, who was called Langals. Their son was Dungad, king of Scotland, or Dungad, the father of William, who was a good man. His son was William the Noble, whom all the Scots wished to take for their king. It is difficult to reconcile this genealogy with those given by Mr. Skene, but it serves to show how the Danes and one or other of the Scottish races were so closely allied as to make it a question whether they were not actually the same people. What the syllable Finn or Fund, as the Irish annals have it, precisely denotes, it is not easy to determine. It occurs in a large number of names and is translated white, which is probably the correct rendering, but it is found in at least one instance along with a Mongolian characteristic. A celebrated leader under Harold the Fair-Haired was Keitil Finn, who is also called Keitil the White, but he was known besides as Keitil or Kitil Flatnose, which points to the possession of Ugrian blood. This Keitil Flatnose was of noble descent and was dispatched to the Hebrides by Harold to bring these islands under subjection, which he succeeded in doing. There is some discrepancy as to this. One account stating that subdued the Hebrides independently of Harold. He attained to great power, and daughter of his Adur the Wealthy was married to Amlaith or Olaf the White, king of Dublin, who was previously been at war with his wife's father, for the Irish annals record in the year 857 a victory by Ivar and Olaf over Peitel, the White, with his Galgal, the mixed Scandinavian Gaelic people of the Hebrides. In the lands of Munster, a son of this marriage was known as Thorstein the Red, which, if this term indicates the complexion, seems to suggest a mixed lineage. So red seems to mean something, huh, to do with complexion. This same Olaf the White seems afterwards to have married a daughter of Kenneth MacAlpin, who was himself of mixed blood. Indeed, whether one looks at the question from the Pictish or from the Danish side, one sees plainly that a great fusion of races was going on during a period of several centuries. Thus, also Harold Harfard himself, whose appellation alone would hint that fair hair was an exceptional feature among his people, was the son of Halfdan Swarte, or the Black. And it is therefore to be presumed that the fair hair was inherited from a white mother. And since Harold II, surnamed Grafel or Grayskin, was the son of Eric Bloody Axe, who was the Finn Gentee, it is as evident that the Grayskin came through a tawny mother. Feuds between near relations seem to have been quite unusual at this time. Not only did Olaf the White war against his father-in-law Ketil Flatnose, but also, in the year 865, he alone with his Gentiles laid waste Pictavia and occupied it from Calends of January to the feast of St. Patrick. The then king of the Picts being the brother of his other wife, Kenneth MacAlpin's daughter. It was only a natural thing, therefore, for Constantine, his brother-in-law, to kill him in the following year as he was withdrawn with his booty. This Olaf must have been restless and daring warrior, for at another time the stronghold of Aclidi, Dumbarton, was besieged by the Northmen under the same Amtleith, along with Imher, Ivar, another of their kings, and destroyed after a 4-month siege. On this occasion, they appear to have also attacked both the Picts of Galloway and the Angles of Bernicia. For in the following year we are told that Amtleith and Imher returned to Dublin from Alban with 200 ships and a great booty of men. Angles, Britons, and Picts was brought with them to Ireland in captivity, all right, to Ireland. It is apparent then that the fair whites and the dark whites, the dark whites, huh, were much more widely separated by physical characteristics at the time of the Danish conquest than at the present day. So widely separated indeed, the dark whites, in parentheses, were only beginning to make their appearance or had not been on the scene for very long. The titles Finn and Dub were still more frequent than Dun. White in parentheses and black in parentheses occur very frequently. Not only were there the white foreigners and the black foreigners, but the Pictish Chronicle has also mention of a native race which Mr. Skene decides were the white Hessians, a white people of the Tees, and on the other side of the pedigrees accredited to Olaf the White, for there is a want of unanimity as to his lineage, states that he was the grandson of Frodi the Gallant, whom the Swartlings killed, that is, whom the Black Dwarfs killed. The Swartilings, huh? The Swartilings, huh? The little Swarty guys. Literally is what it sounds like what they're saying. And literally, Black Dwarfs. The Danes then were like the Moors, black. Once again, all right? Like them too, they were Picts, as more than one eminent writer has proved. The title of Gorm, wood-stained, right? Wood-stained, mahogany, brown, wood-stained, is not confined to Highland genealogies. It was the actual name of a grim old pagan Dane who ruled over Denmark in the earlier part of the 10th century, and the word survived lately in that province of the Black Gentiles. All right. Northumberland where it bore the significance to smear, to dub. So also were the Picts known as such, at home on sea as well as on land, like the Danes, right? What? As black. In the year 729, the Irish annals record that three ships of the Picarda were wrecked this year on Irois cuisine, and 10 years previously there had been fought the maritime battle of Arnesby between Duncan, the son of Bec, with the tribe of Gabran, and Selbach with the tribe Lorn, in which battle certain chiefs were slain. Whether as Danes or as Picts, they were a swarthy, piratical race. So swarthy. And it is interesting to notice that the custom of tattooing has survived longest in their professional descendants, our own seamen. Huh? Their descendants, huh? Swarthy, from Swarthy pirates, huh? It is stated, I see, that although this practice was condemned in the year 785, it was not wholly rooted out of England till after the Norman conquest. It is really it is really not wholly rooted out yet. But before leaving the consideration of the complexion of the Danes, it may be well to make a few more remarks thereon. The islands which were specially their home in Scotland, since an uncertain epoch, are or were known to the people of the mainland as Inkegal or Insegal, the Isles of the foreigners, and to this day, an islander, Insenak, means an Indian. An Indian! That's what kind of foreigner they meant, guys. That's a big one right there. Who were these foreigners settling in the British Isles? Who's the Picts? And although the black heathen, who's the Shatan, Pan Shatan, who's the cat people. And although the black heathens were expelled from these islands many centuries ago, and although as a distinct race they have almost vanished from Europe, yet there may be traces seen of them even yet in the physique and the complexion of their descendants, whether in the Hebrides or elsewhere. Yeah, but you know what happened? They said, oh no, well, your descendants all came from Africa. No, you couldn't have been a Dane. You couldn't have been one of the Picts. No, you couldn't have been none of the ancient Britons. No, no, you guys are all from Africa. But he's letting you know here subliminally, oh, it's still in you. A lot of you, right? I'm not saying this is all you. I'm just saying it's in the genealogy of a lot of people. It would be impossible to decide with certainty who are their descendants, all right? Who are their descendants today and who are not. But so far as complexion goes, the Moors are still largely represented throughout the British Islands. Although, of course, the crossing and recrossing of 30 generations, while increasing the number of descendants, has lessened the intensity of the resemblance to the ancestral stock. But the swarthy hue asserts itself still, though in a modified degree. Last century, when Martin described the western islands of Scotland, he remarked that the complexion of the natives of Skye was, for the most part, black. And remember, we've shown many primary sources, anthropological books, many anthropologists also concurring. And, we've read the books, we've shown them on different videos, all different sources describing the original people of the British Isles and these places too, the island of Scotland and Ireland, and describes a small dark-skinned people and different types as well, different shades, lighter shades, brown, all that, so corroborating with what they're saying here, or what Martin described in the western islands of Scotland, right? That the natives, for the most part, black, so-called black. Of the natives of Judah, or Judah, he said that they were generally black of complexion. Actually, this is the exact same source that I showed. I actually showed the original. And of Iran, they were generally brown. All right, these are the islands in Scotland. And some of the black complexion. All right, Iran, look it up where all these places are. The inhabitants of the Isle Gigay presented a greater mixture. They were fair or brown in complexion. And Pennant, speaking of the Islay people, described them as a lean, withered, dusky and smoke dried. In their memorable tour through the north and west of Scotland, Johnson and Boswell several times took notice of the swarthy color of some of the natives. It will be remembered that Boswell said of the mixed race of the Mac race that there were great diversity in the faces of the circle around us. Some were as black and wild in their appearance as any American savage, whatever. Can I get a body bag for the illusion? You guys understand what he just said? Mic drop. He said they were just as black as the American Indians. All right? He's calling them savages. What's the difference? He said they're just as dark skinned as the American Indians. Huh. And he may have had their complexion before his mind's eye when he said of some of the islanders, our boatmen were rude singers and seemed so like wild Indians. They seem like wild Indians, huh? Was there true origin of a lot of these people of the Scottish Isles, Irish Isles? What is the true origin? Huh? Again, we've gone over, I've mentioned it a lot, and we've shown the navigational routes. We know what land was out first before others, but they act like wild Indians, huh? These so called black indigenous people of the British Isles. That a very little imagination was necessary to give one an impression of being upon an American river. Either way, where am I in America? Am I looking at Indians? I feel like I'm in America. And when he particularized at another time a MacLeod, a robust black-haired fellow, half-naked and beer-headed, something between a wild Indian and an English star, something like a wild Indian, huh? A later writer than Boswell, writing 40 or 50 years ago, speaks to us of the people of Harris. In general, the natives are of a small stature, scarcely any attain the height of 6 feet, and many of the males are not higher than 5 feet 3 or 4 inches. All right, we got a lot of that. Even in the ship manifest of the Jacobites and all that, yeah, a lot of them were that tall. There is nothing very peculiar in the Harrissian physiognomy. The cheekbones are rather prominent, all right, prominent cheekbones, and the nose is invariably short, the space between it and the chin being disproportionately long. The complexion is of all tints, all tints. Many individuals are as dark as mulattoes, while others are nearly as fair as Danes, modern Danes, of course. And so far as I have been able to observe, the dark race is superior to the fair in stature and strength. Okay, that's what he's saying. All right. In respect to intellect, they are acute, accurate observers of natural phenomena, quick of apprehension, and fluent in speech. In their moral character, they are at least much superior to the population of most of the lowland parishes. And finally, one who has every right to speak upon the characteristics of the Western Islanders gives us the following picture of a Highland girl. All right. In the warm nook behind the fire sat a girl with one of those strange foreign faces which are occasionally to be seen in the Western Isles. A face which at that time reminded me of the Nineveh sculptures. All right, an old world face, he's saying, and of faces seen in Saint Sebastian. Her hair was as black as night, and her clear dark eyes glittered through the peak smoke. Her complexion was dark. A Highlander girl. All right? Scotland Highlander girl. People say I'm trying to blackwash or take people's culture, and we're just reading anthropological books, we're doing genealogies, we're pulling out so many sources, all saying the same thing. We got ship manifests describing the people. We got military records describing the people coming from these areas. So many things to corroborate. And then again, we got people's genealogy going back to these people. You can't You can't, bloodline don't lie, genealogy don't lie. So, again, this Highlander girl, her complexion was dark and her features so unlike those who sat about her that I asked if she were a native of the island and learned that she was a Highland girl, that is, from the mainland. She did not differ in complexion from the people beside her, who were the short, dark natives of Barra, but she was just as dark as the people in the outer islands, the outer little islands that are part of Scotland. But she was from the mainland. They all, what? Swarthy, dark complexion. You guys taking notes? Yeah. And the difference in feature is accounted for, says Mr. Campbell, by the supposition generally current there that she and others like her are the descendants of the Spanish crews of the wrecked Armada. All right, that's the whole conjecture that they must be from Spain. But even when they say that, they're kind of admitting that the Spanish and Portuguese were so-called black. So either or, like, make up your mind, because then you say they're not. Make up your mind. There is no reason to discredit such a belief, which if correct, would place this girl out of court as a witness to Danish blood, the short, dark natives of Barra being indeed themselves sufficient. But it may not be necessary to go so far away from the Hebrides to find an explanation of a gypsy faith among the people of these islands, or of the neighboring highlands. Whether we look therefore at the Danes of history, or at the people who today have the best claim to be regarded as their descendants, we see before us men of swarthy skin. And what is more, we see that Meredith and the southern Welsh of the 10th century were by inference Santrocroi, and that extracts proving this have also shown to those of us who were previously in ignorance that the Welsh of Cardiganshire and other parts of the West Wales are largely, if not wholly, Normans, the Welsh. And since Pembroke was in the 12th century partly peopled by Flemings, there must also be a considerable infusion of Flemish blood among the Pembrokeshire Welsh of today, so that in Wales, as in the Scottish Highlands, an immense number of people who believe themselves to be Celts and who are full of enthusiasm on the subject of Celtic languages, which they regard as the immemorial speech of their forefathers, are in actual fact the descendants of Flemings and Normans of 8th or 9th centuries ago. There you go. And again, we had this conversation in the back chat the other day about Celts, and I said it depends because a lot of different groups are being grouped under Celts. And this is a great example. I'm glad I read this, you know. So you can see it did happen. A lot of people being called Celt that weren't Celt. They were actually, as he's saying in this case, descendants of Flemish and Normans of the 8th and 9th century. And a Welsh Jankin, whose ancestors have intermarried with Watkins and Wilkins, Watchin and Wilchin, has as little to do with the Briton of 1,000 years back as have his Scottish kinsmen who descend from Frixkine or from Ines or from Fleming. And trying to discern the lineaments of this or that variety of ancient Britain, we must disregard such Celts altogether, and they are not few in number. I am convinced, says Professor Skeet in the brief notes preface to his etymological dictionary, that the influence of Dutch upon English has been much underrated, and a closer attention to this question might throw some light even upon English history. We read of Flemish mercenary soldiers being employed by the Normans, and of Flemish settlements in Wales, where says old Fabian, I know not with what truth they remained a long while, but after they spread all England over. Like the Norman and other immigrants, they gradually identified themselves with the people of the district in which they settled, and so became Welshmen, Englishmen, and Scot. But they weren't originally that. Their descendants fighting against each other under these names, fully believing themselves to be, as by intermarriage they to some extent were, Welshmen, Englishmen, and Scot, but only through marriage. If blood relationships counted for much, they would not have lost their nationality so easily. But the ties of mutual interest are vastly stronger than the ties of blood. And the American of next century will not stop to consider his lineage. Ooh, big one right there. If his country should happen to fall out with any other power. So the Fleming, as the Norman, became eventually a clannish, a Gaelic speaking Highlander, or bigoted Welshman. They became, they weren't originally, or picking up a few new words, dropping a few old ones, and modifying his accent, he became an Englishman. To return to the Swarty people, all right, let's return to the Swarty people. If the earliest races of Picts or Moors were expelled from the districts in which we now find dark people, or were wholly exterminated there, such people will become the probable descendants of the black strangers. Where's the dark people living, huh, in these areas today? Look what he's saying, huh? Who overran our islands at a later date, and thus the small swarthy Welshman, the small dark Highlander, and the black Celts to the west of the Shannon. All right? Descendants of all these people, not from Africa, are as likely as not the living representatives of the Danes. Okay? While on the other hand, it is evident that the Flemings, the Norsemen, Gentiles of pure color, their king, the Normans, and the Celtic tribes represented by Prince Meredith, the Fionn of tradition, and the barbarian prisoner of South British race are all substantially one people, the Saint Croix of Professor Huxley, and the fair-skinned Germans of the Romans. All right, so that's a lot of big claims right there too. Mixing a lot of people under those titles there, and a lot of Swarty people too. All right, so that's the end of chapter 7, guys. That was a pretty good chapter. That was a really good read. The next chapter is a little longer. I also want to read that, so I'm gonna save it for another video. All right. Hold on. But I appreciate you guys, and I thank you for sticking around, hearing me read this whole chapter. Again, I wanted to read it with you guys. As you guys can see, it was a pretty good chapter, and I think I've gone over it in little extras before in old videos. But again, it was worth it reading the whole chapter and some of these chapters in this book completely, and that's what we're doing. Again, this was the book Ancient and Modern Britons. This is just volume 1. This was written by David MacRitchie. We were in chapter 7. Or again, Black Europeans are real. And history, yeah, they existed. They exist today still, the descendants. And a lot of the descendants, all right, a lot of that blood, let's not say just the descendants, but a lot of that blood is in the blood of a lot of the American so-called black folks, all right? And along with the indigenous part, right? Along with the indigenous part. But as you guys can see, it might go full circle. Might actually go full circle. Who are these people in the British Isles? These early indigenous people. Where were they truly coming from? You know, could they have been coming from the true old world? And yeah, definitely a lot of them did. And we're gonna prove that more and more as we go. All right. So again, that was the book. We're gonna go ahead and leave it right there. Again, appreciate everybody for taking the time to tune in. Let me go ahead and find something, and leave you to your rest of your Friday evening. You know, if you guys, go ahead and do the Shabbat. We'll have a blessed Shabbat. You know, uh, you know, and just put Hawa first. And you'll see how easy things get. You know, blessings and blessings. So thanks for tuning in, mi gente pura vida, mi gente. Appreciate everybody, all the moderators, all the Patreons. Appreciate everybody. Thank you. Let's see what we can go out with here. Pura vida, mi gente. Guau, guau, guau. Nos vemos.